My name is Ari Kohen. I'm from the University of Nebraska, and I wrote a book that published a few years ago about classical heroism, archetypes of heroes in Greek philosophy and Greek myth. And as I was researching for that book, what I noticed was that there were a number of different ways that people thought about heroes back then, and that those were still very much relevant for us today. This was the definition that kind of stuck out. One of the things that I wanted to talk to today is not so much classical Greek philosophy and heroes, but instead heroism, moral courage, and what it means for us now, the kind of lessons we can take from today as we go out of here. One of the things that we've heard so much about is this concept of the everyday hero, people who are ordinary, and who nonetheless do extraordinary things, people who are exemplars of courage, people who stand out. And when we hear those stories, what typically happens is that we think to ourselves, wow, this really is an incredible thing, and I wonder what I would do in a situation like that. We imagine ourselves as these kinds of heroic personalities. We look at those examples and we certainly think to ourselves, this is a thing that I would like to do. I would like to be that sort of person. What we know, of course, is that what we imagine about ourselves isn't actually the same thing as what we might do if we find ourselves in such a situation. And one of the things that I want us to think about together here at the end is how we move from what we imagine of ourselves in those situations past what studies have shown we would actually do, so that we can get to a point where we actually will do what we believe of ourselves. I'm sure you've heard of Wesley Autrey. Several years ago, he became quite famous for jumping down onto subway tracks in New York and saving someone who had fallen. He covered the man who had fallen with his body, and they stayed still while the train kind of rolled to a stop over them. And the thing about Wesley Autrey that is perhaps most relevant or interesting for this moment is that he wasn't by himself when he was on the subway platform, when he jumped down to save that person. There were dozens and dozens of people there with him. And we all know, of course, that he was the one who acted and other people didn't act. So, obviously, this leads us to think about bystanders and the problem of those bystanders. We all think, when we hear about the bystander problem, that we'll do something different, right? We'll be the ones who are not sort of taken in by the bystander effect. We'll stand up, we'll do the right thing, the thing that we imagine ourselves to do. Nobody, when you talk to them, nobody imagines themselves as the bystander. Everyone in the story of their lives imagines themselves to be the hero. So, what are the things that we should learn when we hear these stories? The first, of course, is that heroes are people who do extraordinary things, but these are also ordinary people. And these are people who tend to be just like us, except that they manage to break through that bystander effect and do the thing that we like to imagine we would do. How did they do it? This is the million-dollar question. What I want to suggest is that it's not that they're particularly good and we're not so good. Right? It's not that they're somehow incredibly special, unique, they have some kind of chromosome that the rest of us are lacking or anything like that. It's that they've practiced. And what I want to do with the few minutes that I have here to talk to you is to think with you about some things that you can actually do to get that kind of practice, to make it more likely as you leave here today that you'll be the kind of person who stands up, who breaks through that bystander effect. So I'll just talk about four things pretty briefly. The first, you're in really good shape because you're here today. The first is to have heroes, to really think critically about those heroes. Find people who have done extraordinary things and learn about them. Maybe there are some actually in the audience. You can talk to them. Ask them about themselves. Figure out the biographical information about those people. Try to figure out what it is about them that led them to act the way that they did. There are some books, I think, if Matt brought them, these hero field guides that he worked on that give you really nice looks at some heroes. And the thing to keep in mind is that you should choose your heroes carefully, right? You have to pick the ones that will actually help you, not just someone who's great at basketball, because as much as I try, and I've tried really hard, I'm never going to be the basketball player that LeBron James is. The interesting thing, of course, about this example, I've used it for a while now, LeBron James is actually moving now beyond simply being a great basketball player, right? He's taking public stances that are difficult, right? That are challenging, and that are pushing other people to really deeply consider social issues. Right? So an example I used to use and tell people, leave LeBron to the side, well, maybe bring LeBron in, right? But tell people the thing that I really find worthy of emulation when it comes to LeBron James, it's the public stand he's taking, right? It's when he stands up and says, this is what I believe, and this is the kind of society we should live in, right? It's not how many baskets he scored. Yeah? You also have to recognize that heroes are complicated people. Right? Just because someone takes heroic action in one moment doesn't mean that they always will take heroic action. It doesn't mean that they have a spotless character. Right? Someone like Oskar Schindler, for example, is a great hero for the thing that he did that was heroic. But he was, to say the least, morally ambiguous in the rest of his life. Right? That's okay. You have to be willing to say that. When you ask people and talk to them about your heroes, hear about their heroes, be willing to really consider the ways in which our heroes are nonetheless flawed. Because that humanizes them. It makes them like us. It might make you a little bit uncomfortable to say, this is my hero and this person did something heroic, but also does things that aren't so great sometimes. That's okay, because the second thing you can do to practice is be uncomfortable. Matt didn't wear his orange pants this weekend, so he's left me with only the picture of him in orange pants. But Matt likes to wear orange pants. He wears them a lot. Or my friend Dave Rendell, he wears pink a lot. He has a whole pink situation going on. And it seems to me that this sort of behavior is actually really useful for all of us to think about, right? I don't know, I'm sure they love those colors. I'm sure they picked them for no other reason than that they know how handsome they look in orange or pink. But they also know they stand out when they wear those pants, that jacket, the pink dinosaur t-shirt, right? And practicing standing out is incredibly important because that's ultimately something you'll have to do if you find yourself in a situation that requires heroic action. You have to be the person who's willing to stand up when everybody else is sitting down. So getting in that kind of practice now is going to be really useful for you later on. Be willing to be uncomfortable. The third thing, admittedly, sounds more difficult than the other things, right? I get it. Expand your sense of empathy. This one requires a little bit more discussion, a little bit more explanation, and it's going to require a little more practice from you, to be perfectly honest. Yeah? You'll have to do a little bit more hard work. It's not just putting on a pair of brightly colored pants. You have to think about things from the perspective of other people. You have to really get outside of yourself and start to think about all those people around you, especially people who you might not otherwise have associated with yourself. Right? People you might say are different from you in what you think of as some important way. I was doing a project and I was interviewing students at one point, and we were talking about Holocaust education, right? And I asked these students, what mattered to them, how they thought it impacted their life. And there's one student who really stood out to me. He said, this is important. It's real. I should study it. I understand, but I don't see how it impacts my life. I said, well, what do you want to do in the future? And he said, I want to be a journalist. And I said, and you don't see how something like the Holocaust impacts your life. Well, what do you think about human rights situations in Syria, right, or in Sudan? And he was completely taken aback because those things were not on his radar, right? He didn't see it. He wasn't paying attention. One way to make sure that you can start expanding your sense of empathy is to pay attention to what's going on around you. Sometimes that means turning off a device or leaving it in your pocket. This is the first time I've presented and not had my phone in my pocket, so I'm missing all of those great notifications when you're telling everybody on Twitter that this is the best of all of the talks you've heard so far. I'm missing it, but it's okay because I'm with you here, so I'm paying attention. I'm getting the cues directly from you instead of mediated through a device, right? And it really matters to do that, to get into a little bit of a habit of seeing what's going on around you. The only way you'll know if someone needs help is if you're looking up, if you're paying attention, if you recognize the other person as important, as doing the kinds of things that matter to you, as being like you, worthy of your attention and your time and your care. The last thing, the fourth thing, do small good things. Practice this. I will give you 2 examples. There are lots of times that you can do this, and I want to show you just how small it is. The first is try to think about what it would mean to take someone's shopping cart back for them. This is something that means a lot to me personally. I have 4 small children. And I go grocery shopping and I take them with me, and I live in Nebraska where it is mostly cold most of the time. And if you've ever tried to go grocery shopping with lots of children, you know that there's a whole dance that goes on here. So you come out of the grocery store and you've got your cart and it's full of groceries, and there are kids, and 2 of them are holding on to the cart, and then you've got 2 in the little basket with their legs dangling. It's a lot going on. And you get to the car and you don't really know what to do. You put all the kids in the car because it's cold. That takes a while. Then you put the groceries in the car. Now the kids are in the car, the groceries are in the car, and you have the shopping cart, right? And you really know that if you leave the kids in the car and go return the shopping cart, someone is going to call the police or child welfare or whatever, because you're not supposed to leave children in the car, right? And all the while you're standing there trying to work this out, there's just a line of people walking past you, right? And they're going from their cars into the grocery store, and what's the first thing they're going to do when they get into the grocery store? They're going to grab a cart, right? But no one ever says, hey, I'll take that cart for you. And truthfully, it's such a small thing, but it would make my day, right? And it would do that for other people as well. So I try as often as I can to take the cart. The last thing, I work in a 12-story building. There are terrible elevators in this building. I work on the 5th floor, and you're always standing and waiting for the elevators. They go up, then they go halfway down, then they go to the 3rd floor, and they stay there for a while, then they go back up. If you miss the elevator on the ground floor, you're waiting for 10 minutes. And everybody knows this because we're all in that building all the time, but I always find myself getting to the elevator just at that moment when the doors are closing. And I know what that means. It means I'm going to stand there for a really long time waiting for that elevator to come back. And the person in the elevator knows what this means for me too, but they don't hold the door, right? I see them, they see me. We have this 2 seconds where everybody knows what's happening here, and off they go, right? What I'm trying to do is encourage people to hold the door, right? It's not that hard, but it just takes a little bit of practice. You have to be ready to hold the door, because if you take that time to think about it, it's going to be too late by the time you reach out for the button. So what I've been doing for the last few years is I carry candy around with me, and whenever somebody holds the door, I just toss them a piece of candy. I just a quick thank you, and I say, I saw that, thanks a lot, appreciate that. The last thing I want to leave you with is what I always try to end with, and that is to say, look, you have these 4 things you can do, but please remember, heroism is risky, right? Heroism has a risk component, a sacrifice component. I always say, I hope I never have to be a hero. I hope you never do too, because a lot of the time, most of the time, a situation that requires a hero is a situation in which just about everything has gone wrong. I hope you don't find yourself in that situation. I hope that you practice these 4 things just in case. But I hope that you never find yourself using them. And the best part is, when you do these 4 things, it just makes things better. Even if you're never called upon to be heroic in some emergency situation. You've had heroes, you've talked about them. You've practiced standing up when other people are sitting down, making yourself a little uncomfortable. You've expanded your sense of empathy, and you've done a lot of small good things. And really, those are all great things to do. So let's get out and we'll start practicing. Thank you very much.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.